Imagine arriving in Paris. You step out into the arrival terminal and the entire building is actually shaking. The noise is absolutely deafening. You look around and see a massive ocean of blue and red and yellow flags blocking the international exits. The local French media is rushing around with their cameras looking completely confused. They think a global pop star just landed. Or maybe a Hollywood icon. Because the energy in the room is completely unhinged. People are screaming. Grown adults are literally crying tears of joy. But then the massive crowd slowly parts. And standing right in the middle of this absolute chaos is not a celebrity. It is a 19-year-old girl. She is just carrying a backpack and a heavy tennis bag. And while everyone around her is losing their minds, she just stands there with this incredibly quiet and piercing stare. This is the terrifying and beautiful reality of Alex Eala. When a normal teenager wins a junior grand slam, they get a nice trophy and maybe an article in a local sports magazine. When Alex swings her racket, she literally stops an entire country. You have to realize that this level of public obsession is not just about a game. It is about an identity. The people waiting in that airport are not just casual tennis fans. They are a nation of 115 million people who have been starving for a global conqueror. Professional tennis is already the most isolating sport on the planet. You are completely alone on the court. No coach to save you. No teammate to pass the ball to when things get tough. Now imagine standing on that lonely baseline knowing that every single point you play is being watched by a country that has never had a seat at the elite tennis table. They do not just want her to play well. They need her to prove to the rest of the world that they belong. They have taken all of that generational hunger and placed it directly onto the shoulders of a single teenager. And historically speaking, that exact kind of pressure does not create champions. It usually grinds them into dust. The transition from being a junior prodigy to fighting for your life on the professional tour is a brutal awakening. The veteran players on the tour do not care how many fans you have at the airport. They only want to break your spirit. The scenes in France look like a massive victory parade. But it is actually an incredibly beautiful illusion that begs a terrifying question. What happens when you are the sole heartbeat of a nation in a sport your country has never even conquered? To understand why the French were so confused by this massive airport crowd, you have to understand the absolute anomaly of Alex Eala. In a country where basketball is a religion, tennis was barely a whisper. If you walk down any street in Manila, you will hear the exact same rhythm. The heavy bounce of a basketball on cracked concrete, the squeak of old shoes on makeshift courts, or the sharp thud of boxing gloves hitting a heavy bag in a sweltering garage. These are the arenas of survival. These are the places where Filipino legends are traditionally forged, because boxing and basketball are accessible. They are the sports of the people. But tennis was completely different. For decades, it was viewed as an elite luxury, a sport played on immaculate grass courts in London or perfect red clay in Paris. It felt completely disconnected from the daily reality of Southeast Asia. The global tennis establishment never looked at the Philippines and expected a conqueror to walk through the door. The narrative was already written for us. We were supposed to be too small, too fragile for the modern power game of professional tennis. We were just not built for the crushing baseline rallies that define the tour today. And then came a left-handed teenager who decided to break the entire system. When Alex steps onto the court, she shatters every single geographical stereotype. She does not just play the game, she dictates it. When she hits a heavy topspin forehand that pushes a European veteran 5 feet behind the baseline, she is not just winning a point for her academy. She is making a statement for her bloodline. She is telling the elite tennis world that the Philippines has finally arrived. And the people back home felt that shift instantly. Filipinos are arguably the most fiercely loyal sports fans on the planet. When one of their own breaks through, the entire country literally stops working. They do not just watch, they adopt you. So when Alex started lifting junior Grand Slam trophies, the reaction was explosive. Social media went into an absolute frenzy. Suddenly, people who did not even know how tennis scoring worked were waking up at 3 in the morning to watch pixelated streams of her matches. They saw this young girl holding her own against the giants of the sport. They saw a reflection of their own national resilience. The ultimate underdog story playing out on a global stage. But this is exactly where the fairy tale gets incredibly dangerous. Because a nation starved for a hero does not just cheer for you. They project all of their unfulfilled dreams right onto your shoulders. The support is beautiful. It is intoxicating. But it is also incredibly heavy. When you are a junior player, that weight feels like a warm embrace. You are the pride of the nation. Everyone loves the rising star. Everyone loves the potential of what you could eventually become. But potential has a dark side. The second you turn pro, the expectations shift violently. The country is no longer just hoping you do well. They expect you to dominate. They expect you to walk into the professional circuit and immediately dismantle players who have been surviving on the tour for a decade. They see a junior champion, and they immediately demand a world number one. And this is the exact trap that destroys almost every young prodigy. The gap between being the best 18-year-old in the world and being the 50th best adult in the world is a massive canyon. It is a brutal, unforgiving transition. The professional tour is not about talent. It is about physical endurance and mental warfare. It is about facing women who are fighting for their livelihoods. Women who will absolutely tear a teenager apart just to pay for their next flight. Alex was no longer playing against kids her own age. She was stepping into the deep end of the ocean with absolute sharks. And she had 115 million people sitting in the boat watching her every single move. While millions of people were screaming her name in Manila, she was standing in absolute silence on a clay court in Spain. The cheers from the airport in Paris were starting to fade. The reality of the professional grind was setting in, and the suffocating grip of the expectations of an entire nation was about to pull her under. Because at this point, this was no longer just a tennis career. It was a national movement. And that is exactly why the next chapter is so unbelievable. But here is the terrifying part about having thousands of people cheer for you at an airport. When the lights go down, the internet only demands perfection. And they have no idea how brutal the professional circuit actually is. The junior tour gives you beautiful silver trophies and viral moments on social media. The pro tour gives you physical scars and empty bank accounts. Imagine holding a junior Grand Slam title. You feel absolutely invincible. You are the pride of the Philippines. Then, just 2 weeks later, you are standing on a poorly maintained clay court in a tiny European village. There are no television cameras. There are maybe 15 people sitting on wooden benches. Across the net is a 28-year-old woman who has been grinding on the lower professional circuit for a decade. She is wearing a faded shirt. She is fighting for enough prize money to pay for her train ticket home. She does not care about your national hype. She does not care about your Instagram followers or your prestigious academy background. She looks at a hyped teenager and she sees a target. She has been surviving on cheap pasta and terrible hotel coffee for years. She knows how to manipulate the pace of the game. She knows how to use the wind. She wants to drag you into the absolute mud and break your spirit entirely. And this is where the physical reality sets in. Because the body of a teenager is simply not built for this kind of violence. Professional tennis is a physical meat grinder. 3-hour matches under a blistering sun. The heavy topspin of grown women hitting your racket like a concrete block. The micro tears in your shoulders. The blisters on your feet that tear open and bleed into your socks. Every single match becomes an agonizing battle for physical survival. But the physical pain is absolutely nothing compared to the psychological torture waiting in her pocket. Because the fans back home were conditioned to see her win. They saw the airport footage. They saw the junior titles. And they naively assumed the professional tour would be exactly the same. They do not understand the brutal architecture of professional tennis. They do not realize how much blood it takes to earn a single ranking point on the WTA tour. So when she inevitably loses a tight match to a veteran player, something incredibly dark happens. The illusion of unconditional national support shatters completely. She goes back to a cheap hotel room. She sits on the edge of the bed in the dark. The only light is the glow of her phone screen. And when she opens her social media, she does not see support. She sees thousands of venomous messages. The exact same people who called her a national hero yesterday are now typing absolute poison. They type out paragraphs dissecting her technique as if they have ever held a racket. They say she is a massive disappointment. They say she peaked too early. They accuse her of caring more about endorsements than winning. It is a massive psychological betrayal. And honestly, this is the exact moment where the story of a prodigy usually ends. Because who do you turn to when your own country turns its back on you? The isolation becomes completely suffocating. People think moving to Spain to train at the Rafa Nadal Academy is a glamorous lifestyle. They picture a luxury vacation on a Mediterranean island. That is a massive lie. The academy is an elite athletic monastery. It is specifically designed to strip away your comfort. She had to leave her family when she was just a kid. No familiar faces, no home-cooked Filipino meals, just the freezing winter mornings, waking up at dawn, washing your own clothes, walking into an empty gym while the rest of the world is sleeping. The isolation is not just physical, it is entirely mental. You watch your friends back home going to college. You see them attending parties and living normal lives. Meanwhile, your entire existence is measured by your win and loss ratio. The silence in those early morning training sessions is deafening. It is just the brutal, repetitive thud of a tennis ball against a concrete wall. The transition period from junior to professional lasts for years. It is a terrifying plateau. You fly economy across 3 different time zones. You eat terrible food at airport terminals. You try to sleep in uncomfortable chairs while waiting for delayed flights. The aura of the chosen one completely vanishes. You become a sports nomad just trying to survive the week. And the veterans on the tour are ruthless. They start studying her game. They realize she is left-handed. They realize she relies on heavy spin. So they adapt. They flatten out their shots. They force her to run corner to corner until her teenage legs literally give out. Every tactical adjustment she makes gets immediately neutralized. The losses start piling up. First-round exits. Failed qualification attempts. The rankings stall. The media starts asking uncomfortable questions. The toxic comments multiply. The wall blocking her from the top 100 looks completely impenetrable. She tries to hit harder, but the ball sails long. She tries to play safer, but the veterans step in and crush winners past her. There is no middle ground. The pressure is no longer a motivation. It is a physical weight crushing her chest. She is 19 years old. She is thousands of miles from Manila. She is trapped in a mental prison built by the expectations of 115 million people, and as she steps onto the court for yet another grueling match against a veteran who wants to end her career early, the problem suddenly feels completely unsolvable. This is the exact moment where most teenage prodigies completely crack under the pressure. The mental exhaustion usually wins. The toxic comments break their spirit and they quietly fade away into the lower tiers of the sport. But this is also where Alex Eala proved she is built entirely different. Picture a sweltering afternoon on a heavy clay court in Europe. The humidity is choking her lungs. The red dirt is sticking to her shoes, making every step feel like walking through wet cement. She is down a set and staring at a scoreboard that feels like a public execution. Across the net is a hardened veteran who smells blood in the water. The veteran hits a deep punishing ball right at her feet. In the past, this is exactly where the teenager would panic. This is the split second where the weight of the entire Philippines would shatter her focus and force a wild, unforced error. The ghosts of the toxic internet comments would flood her mind. She would try to hit a ridiculous winner just to escape the rally. And this is where you have to ask yourself a very serious question. Could you handle the expectations of 100 million people at 19 years old while losing on global television? Let me know down below in the comments, because frankly, most adults would completely break down in tears. Tell me how you would survive that mental prison. Because Alex did something completely unexpected. She went totally silent. If you look closely at her face in these terrifying high-stakes moments, you do not see panic. You do not see a scared kid missing her home in Manila. You see an eerie, terrifying calm. And honestly, this was the most terrifying part. Not the heavy forehand. Not the footwork. The absolute silence in her eyes. This is the secret weapon nobody in the media wants to talk about. Everyone praises her physical technique, but the actual weapon comes directly from the island of Majorca. Training at the Rafa Nadal Academy is not just about hitting 1,000 tennis balls a day. It is a total psychological reprogramming. Rafa built his entire legendary career on one agonizing philosophy. You play every single point like your life depends on it. You do not look at the scoreboard. You do not think about the fans waiting at the airport. You do not think about the critics. You focus on the yellow ball, and you survive the current second. So she is down a set. The rally stretches to 10 shots, then 15, then 20. The lungs of a normal teenager would burn. The legs would tremble. The mind would surrender to the overwhelming physical pain of the clay court grind. But Alex steps inside the baseline. She refuses to retreat. She takes the ball incredibly early on the rise. With one violent swing of her racket, she rips a heavy left-handed forehand down the line that leaves the veteran completely frozen in the dirt. The ball clips the edge of the white line. The small crowd erupts. The umpire calls the score, but Alex barely reacts. She just turns around and walks quietly to her towel. That single point is not just a highlight reel moment for social media. It is a psychological revolution, because in that split second she proved that she is no longer a fragile junior player intimidated by the professional circuit. She sent a clear and terrifying message to the veteran across the net. I am not going anywhere, and you are going to have to bleed to take this match from me. This shift in mentality changes everything. The illusion of the weak prodigy shatters into a million pieces. When you finally realize that the national pressure is not going to kill you, it actually becomes your ultimate fuel. The veteran across the net suddenly starts to feel the pressure instead. The veteran realizes she is no longer playing a scared teenager. She is playing a machine that refuses to miss and feeds on the stress of the moment. Alex stopped trying to play perfect, beautiful tennis and started playing survival tennis. She learned how to win ugly. She learned how to grind out agonizing matches on days when her body felt completely broken and her serve was not working. And you can literally see her aura change. When she walks onto the court, now she carries a different kind of gravity. The opponents feel it in the locker room before they even step outside. She took the crushing weight of 115 million people and turned it into an impenetrable shield. But saying she survived the mental transition is one thing. Actually, executing it against the most ruthless competitors on the planet is an entirely different story. Because the Pro Tour does not care about your inspiring mindset. They only respect the cold, hard facts on the scoreboard. And the scoreboard was about to tell a story that would send absolute shockwaves through the entire tennis establishment. The proof of this transformation is not found in a carefully edited highlight reel. The real proof is written in the dirt and the sweat of some of the most grueling matches of her life. Because talking about a psychological shift is easy, but executing it against women who want to break you is a completely different reality. Look at her historic run at the Asian Games. The humidity in Hangzhou was absolutely suffocating. The air felt heavy enough to drown in. She was not playing for a paycheck. She was wearing the national colors and playing for the flag. She stepped onto the court against opponents who were older and physically stronger. Players who had spent years mastering the brutal conditions of Asian hard courts. In the past, a teenager might have crumbled under the sheer exhaustion of the tournament schedule. But Alex simply refused to die on the court. She dragged herself through grueling 3-set matches. She fought off match points with a terrifying level of patience. She brought home 2 bronze medals and ended a decades-long drought for her country. That is not just winning. That is bleeding for your nation. Then look at her grinding through the professional circuit in Europe. She is standing on a heavy court in Spain. She is playing a hardened professional who hits the ball like a freight train. And here is the technical secret that casual fans completely miss. This is exactly how the Nadal blueprint actually works in real life. Most teenagers play tennis like a desperate sprint. They hit the ball flat and fast and try to end the point in 3 shots because they are terrified of long physical rallies. Alex plays tennis like a slow, suffocating python. Because she is left-handed, the spin she puts on the ball is entirely reversed. When she hits her heavy topspin forehand, the ball does not just bounce straight. It kicks up violently right into the shoulder of a right-handed opponent. It is an incredibly uncomfortable position to hit from. She pins them deep into the backhand corner. She hits one heavy ball, then another, then another. She does not panic. She just keeps pushing you further and further behind the baseline until your legs burn and your lungs scream for air. And the exact second you hit a short ball just to survive the rally, she steps inside the baseline and ends it. She completely drains the oxygen out of the opponent. It is a masterclass in tactical geometry. Look at her recent matches against players ranked in the top 100. Women who have played in the main draw of Wimbledon and the US Open. Alex is no longer just surviving against them, she is dragging them into deep waters. She is dictating the terms of the match. And that is exactly why the scoreboard started to look completely different. Moving from rank 300 to the top 150 is not an elevator ride. It is climbing a glass wall with your bare hands. Every single ranking point is violently defended by a veteran who wants to keep her job. But Alex started winning $50,000 events. She started surviving the qualification rounds of major professional tournaments. She stopped being the prey and started becoming the predator. But if you only look at the statistics and the rankings, you are missing the greatest achievement of her entire career. Because the real proof of her greatness is not happening in Paris or Spain or London. The real proof is happening right now in the streets of Manila. Think about the cultural impact for a second. The Philippines is a nation that worships the NBA. Basketball hoops are nailed to every telephone pole in every neighborhood. But something incredibly strange and beautiful is starting to happen. Search volumes for tennis lessons are exploding. Local sports clubs are suddenly seeing parents bring in their 7-year-old daughters holding oversized rackets. You walk past a public park and instead of hearing a basketball, you hear the distinct popping sound of a tennis ball. Alex has essentially created a glitch in the cultural matrix of her country. She has proven to an entire generation of kids in Southeast Asia that they are not too small. They are not too fragile. They do not have to stick to the sports that society tells them to play. When a little girl in a provincial town watches Alex hit a blazing forehand against a European giant, she is not just watching a tennis match. She is watching a blueprint for her own future. She is realizing that the global stage is not locked behind a closed door. Alex is wielding a massive amount of soft power. She is changing the psychology of 100 million people without saying a single word. She is turning a basketball nation into a country that suddenly knows the difference between a slice and a drop shot. And honestly, that is a victory that is infinitely bigger than any piece of silver hardware. She could retire tomorrow, and her legacy would already be permanently burned into the history books of Philippine sports. But she is not retiring. She is only 19 years old. She has survived the brutal transition. She has mastered the mental warfare of the professional tour. She has weaponized the pressure of her nation. The foundation has been poured in concrete, and the walls of her empire are starting to rise. Which brings us to the ultimate question. The question that is keeping the rest of the professional tennis world awake at night. Because if she is already doing this level of damage as a teenager while carrying the absolute heaviest expectations in the sport, what exactly is going to happen when she finally steps onto the biggest stage of them all? Let us go back to that arrival terminal in Paris for a second. Think about the absolute chaos. The screaming fans blocking the exits. The massive sea of blue and red and yellow flags. When you first watched that footage at the beginning of this video, you probably felt terrified for her. You saw a quiet teenager carrying an impossible burden. You probably thought the crushing expectations of 115 million people would eventually break her. But now you know the actual truth. That massive crowd is not a burden. That crowd is an armor. The journey from a hyped junior prodigy to a legitimate champion on the professional circuit is an absolute bloodbath. It is a ruthless marathon that destroys almost everyone who attempts it. Do not get it twisted. There will absolutely be more agonizing losses ahead. There will be days when her heavy left-handed forehand completely disappears. There will be painful tears in empty locker rooms after exhausting 3 set wars on the dirt. The meat grinder of the professional tour never truly stops spinning. But she has already survived the hardest part. She took the exact pressure that was supposed to destroy her and turned it into her greatest weapon. The fear of failure is completely gone. She looked the absolute harshest realities of professional tennis right in the eye, and she simply did not blink. So what exactly comes next? The answer is the absolute biggest stages in the history of the sport. The entire global tennis establishment is slowly waking up to a terrifying new reality. The veterans in the locker room are starting to whisper her name. Imagine the heavy red clay of Roland Garros in the spring. Imagine the immaculate green grass of Wimbledon in the summer. Picture the roaring, chaotic night matches under the massive floodlights in New York at the US Open. A teenager from a tropical basketball-obsessed nation is coming for their most prestigious trophies. She is no longer just a prospect trying to survive. She has evolved into a completely different kind of predator. And if she is already doing this level of damage as a teenager while carrying the absolute heaviest expectations in the entire sport, then the rest of the WTA desperately needs to pay attention. If you want to witness exactly how she conquers those major tournaments and rewrites the history books, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. This story is genuinely just getting started, and you absolutely do not want to miss the climax of this masterpiece. And drop a comment down below to send your energy directly to her. Build a wall of support and protect her from the toxic noise. Because the history of Philippine sports has already been permanently changed. But the absolute best chapters of this book are still completely blank. And one thing is absolutely certain. The next time she walks down a dark tunnel and steps out onto a massive stadium court, whether that is in Paris or London or New York, she will never be walking alone, waiting right there on the baseline with her behind every single violent swing of her. Racket is a fiercely loyal nation of 115 million people. Laban Alex.